It's time for Forethought. Sally Kettle gives a personal view in front of an audience at the RSA in London. The presenter is David Baddiel.
Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. It's a good motto and certainly makes more sense than many a mickle makes a muckle. Tonight's speaker, Sally Kettle, has certainly done her share of preparing for the worst. Many times she's faced the kind of life-threatening situations where you'd think there would be little left to do but hope. Instead, she has a personal philosophy of hopelessness, which she chanced upon after spending 4 months in a rowing boat with her mother. And she wants to challenge the way our current thinking may limit potential and encourage procrastination. Sally Kettle.
Hi. Is it just me, or are we entering a world where language is being reduced to 140 characters or fewer, where the youth of today have become oblivious to the nuances of the English language? Whatever happened to grammar, spelling, punctuation? Don't get me wrong. I understand how language changes and adapts over time, but words do have their own power, and it's this that I want to explore. So, for example, you could say that by using the word love too often, you reduce its power. Well, I'm going to challenge you and say if you use the word hope too often, it reduces your own power. The context in which we use words has meaning. It represents who we are, what we're about, and what drives us. So I'm going to explore a question that has resonated with me since my experiences at sea. Does hope help? We all use the gestures. I hope you do well, I hope you recover, I hope you can make it. And of course there's the expression of optimism, oh, I hope so. It appears in religious contexts as one of the theological virtues, faith, hope and charity. During his presidential campaign, even one of the most influential men in the world, Barack Obama, made extensive reference to hope as having the stubbornness of character to persist in the face of adversity. Well, all these hopes are well and good, but my use of hope today isn't one of those. It's what you might call wishful idealism, a desire that something will change or someone or something will intervene. It's the hope that's supposed to right wrongs, restore balance and make the world a better place. I'm going to come clean. I'm going to tell you that I'm very low on the spirituality stakes, and that's perhaps why I wouldn't dream of looking to another to change things how they are or how they're going to be. I don't have much time for fate either, but anyway, I digress. I'd like to take you out to sea, because that's where this thoughts bubble really started to take shape. You'll need to imagine me with my petite, ginger-haired gardener of a mother, Sarah, Sagittarius. We're in a little rowing boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, some 1,500 miles from anywhere in every direction. It's one of those rare occasions where the nearest man-made object is a satellite orbiting above the Earth. We were attempting to go from La Gomera in the Canaries to Barbados, and it was a journey of about 3,000 miles, but we did a little bit further because we kept going round in circles. But neither of us had any ocean rowing experience, but one thing we did share was a goal of not to fail. In fact, I didn't realise I shared this perspective with my mother until she jumped aboard the boat with me. Here we were, content in our little world of never-ending blueness. But we had a problem. We were going in the wrong direction. We were supposed to be going to Barbados, but we were actually floating to Florida. And at that point, I was not a joy to be with. I was whinging a lot. I was saying things like, oh, I hope the wind changes. I hope the weather changes. My mum shouted, stop! Stop hoping all the time. In this situation, it doesn't help. You see, I'm going to take you back a bit, because for years my mum and I hadn't had the best relationships. In lots of ways, I'd hoped that it would somehow sort itself out. When I left home at 16, that hope definitely didn't help. And I struggled in a relationship with my mother until I saw an opportunity to change it. I entered an ocean rowing race, strangely, and asked her to come with me, even stranger, because I knew she was bloody-minded enough to do it, and maybe it would be a chance for me to get to know my mum. She said yes, and it changed our lives forever. So here we were, floating to Florida, and I was hopelessly hoping, and Mum was about ready to hit me round the face with a wet flying fish. But because Mum's still my mum, when she tells you off, I have to listen. And she explained, in this situation, hope doesn't help. We can do what we can do in the situation as it presents itself, and if the weather's good, we row, and if it's not, we stop and we clean the boat and rest. That was the plan. So we adopted a phrase, no hope on the boat. Sounds a bit defeatist, doesn't it? But it worked for us. And of course, the weather changed, and we zoomed 2.5 knots into Barbados. 4 months at sea. In a boat the size of an average bathroom. 23 foot long by 6 foot wide, it was very small. A chap in his 60s, rowing on his own, came in a month quicker than we did. We were built for comfort, not for speed. But we became the first mother and daughter to row any ocean, with a world record to boot. So this idea of no hope on the boat has really struck with me. I became conscious of every time I said, I hope so, and I hope this, and I hope that. If I hoped, was I making a decision? Or was I stopping myself from taking control of my own destiny? At times, it felt as if I was waiting for divine intervention. And as you know, I'm not spiritual, so I could have been waiting for a very long time. I realised that when I hoped, I was actually procrastinating. I was saying it whenever things were out of my control or when I had no intention to take action. So I had a eureka moment. I decided to become a hopeless person and find out what it really means to live without hope. I wanted to know if it made me any less optimistic about life and the opportunities within it. With so many religions underpinned by this idea of giving, receiving, and believing in hope, would I be a less virtuous person for not wanting hope in my own life? When I shared my thoughts with my friends, they were horrified. I thought of Dante and that warning in the Divine Comedy written over the gates of hell, you know the bit, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. It's all very melodramatic and a little bit scary. Well, what if abandoning hope wasn't some terrifying prospect, but plain common sense and solid advice? It doesn't have to feel like purgatory to live without hope. Maybe if we forced ourselves to think of practical alternatives, we might do the right thing here on earth. Anyway, I decided to try out hopelessness for a while. I'd check myself every time I went to say it. It's particularly relevant at the moment because I'm trying to achieve the seemingly impossible, and that's produce my first feature film. And there exists an overwhelming temptation to say, oh, I hope so, and I hope this, and I hope that, especially when we're trying to get a director at the moment, and so on and so forth. But I have to admit, I'm not despairing more that I have less hope. In fact, I'm more optimistic than ever before. And I think that's because I take more action. This doesn't mean that I'm constantly doing something, irrespective of whether it's appropriate or not. I'm just actively making a choice. And that could be choosing to do nothing. I started to believe that for many of us, to hope is to be passive. It's asking God or fate or someone else to intervene. I also worry that with hope comes expectation, often unrealistic and sometimes disappointing. I'm not suggesting that we dispense with hope completely, but maybe turning it into a taboo word for a while and seeing what happens. I do agree there are some really dire circumstances where holding on to hope seems like the only way to survive. There are many situations where one's opportunity to make choices has been taken away from you. I do appreciate that many people rely on hope for survival. But in becoming hopeless, I've become more aware of the privileges of my own upbringing and my good health. And it's something I try not to take for granted. With all this in mind, you can imagine how I was a bit dismayed by Barack Obama's Audacity of Hope campaign. That's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but you kind of know what I mean. surely it's more audacious to be active, to actually do something, to take responsibility for yourself, your family and your community. To me, it seemed like he was peddling positivity, but with nothing substantial to back it up. It's interesting because I had a debate with a friend about this. He said that he'd seen Barack Obama speak and how fantastically charismatic and inspirational he was. And he said, surely inciting hope might inspire people to take action. Might inspire? Wouldn't a call to actual action be more appropriate? We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the streets, in the fields. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. This sounds a bit more powerful to me than, I hope we don't get invaded. I hope we're able to fight them on the beaches. And if we all hope together, then hopefully we'll win the war. If there are choices and actions we can take, then perhaps we should stop hoping and start doing. Back to Mum again. My mum has a friend. She's an elderly lady she looks after, and her name's Gladys, 108. 108 because that's how old she turned this year. 108 years old. And everybody wants to know how she's done it, how she's kept going. I'm convinced it's the half bottle of red wine she drinks every night. But Mum says she's getting a bit fed up of being asked all the time. But Gladys told her, you've just got to keep living. That's the secret. It sounds like a very action-based plan to me. So, I have a suggestion, and I'm going to borrow from Edward de Bono. He suggested Poe as an alternative to yes and no. He wanted to aid more creative thinking, although, to be honest, I think the Poe thing's a bit of a stupid idea. If somebody asked you if you wanted a cup of tea and you answered with Poe, what does that mean? Yes, please, that'll be white with 2 sugars, thank you very much. But the notion holds good because it frees up our thought processes. We stop relying on old words and related concepts of thinking. We're back to the idea of treating hope as a taboo word for a while and maybe looking for a new one to replace it. So, if hope is controlling our horizons rather than help us see beyond them, I'm going to suggest the word wonder. It's not a very good alternative in every context, but it's a good place to start. So if we wondered instead of hoped, then you'd present yourself with a question rather than a belief. I wonder if this will happen. I wonder if that will take place. You're asking yourself the question, so it spurs you into action to find the answer. So what if we abandoned hope as word and as mindset, even in desperate circumstance? What if we looked at all the things we could do instead of just hoping and forced ourselves to choose the best course of action? So I'll leave you with the question again. Does hope help? If it does, then please hold on to it. But upon consideration, if you're just procrastinating, then maybe it's time to do something. So for now, as I mentioned, I'm low on the spirituality scale, but I think it's relevant to quote from the Gospel according to St. Elvis. A little less conversation, a little more action, please. Thank you very much.
Sally Kettle was the speaker in Forethought, presented by David Baddiel from the RSA in London. The producer was Giles Edwards, and you can catch up with other programmes in the series on the Radio 4 website. In next